All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. My name is Tyler Brum. I am the Assistant Director of Alumni Engagement here at Bryant University. I'm very excited to be introducing this webinar today with Lori Coakley. So, on behalf of Bryant's Alumni Association, welcome to our first of 3 webinars this fall, designed to share alumni professional expertise with Bryant grads, students, and the community. Before I turn the program over to our presenter, Dr. Lori Coakley, and our facilitator, Beth Carter, I just need to provide everyone with a couple of pointers for today's webinar, which will last for approximately 1 hour. All participants are in a listen-only mode. However, we encourage you to comment and ask questions using the question and answer feature located in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. We will also be using the polling feature today, giving the audience an opportunity to chime in on questions from our presenter. After today's presentation, you will all receive a short survey. Please take a moment to provide feedback because your comments are valuable as we expand our professional development programs for alumni. Now I will turn the program over to Beth Carter. Beth has owned Carter Consultants, an international executive search firm, for over 26 years. Her second business, Beth Carter Enterprises, is an executive, business, and career coaching and motivational speaking firm. Beth graduated from Bryant with a degree in business administration with a concentration in business communications in '85, and currently has 2 children attending Bryant, continuing on their family legacy. On top of her many certifications and qualifications, Beth is also a member of our National Alumni Council at Bryant and has hosted 3 of these career webinars that we're listening to now. Beth, we truly do appreciate you, and take it away.
Thank you so much, Tyler, and welcome everyone. It's always exciting to be part of this career webinar series. I am very proud to introduce today's presenter. She's a very good friend of mine, Dr. Lori Coakley. Lori is a professor of management at Bryant University and has been for over 20 years. She's also a faculty fellow for the Hassenfeld Institute for Public Leadership. Her research, teaching, and consulting work center on organizational behavior, leadership, customer service, personal branding, and negotiation, and strategic management. She's a certified facilitator in innovation and design thinking. On a personal note, her son Jack graduated from Bryant in May, and her daughter Samantha is a sophomore at Bryant, so she also has legacy. So take it away, Lori.
Thank you very much, Beth, and thank you, Tyler, for the great introduction. I am so excited to be here today and to share this webinar with you. The topic of initiating change and influencing strategy is very prevalent. Many of the business journals talk about this, but why it becomes so important today is it's really something that mid-level managers wrestle with. It's very challenging to be in the middle of the organization, recognize the need for change, recognize that you want to make some things happen, that you are interfacing with customers or suppliers or distributors or your employees, feel like you have a pulse on some things going on and would like to prove your mettle a little bit, move up, and you want to know how to do this successfully. And so hopefully today, by the end of it, you'll have 5 strategies that will provide you with some insights on how you can be a savvy influencer at the mid-level range and how you can use it to move up in the organization and to make things happen both strategically and other areas of the organization. So we basically have 2 objectives today. The first is kind of to discuss with you what determines the types of changes mid-level managers are going to initiate. And we're going to talk a little bit about what is a reactive change versus a proactive change. And then more importantly, and most importantly, I think to you, is to provide 5 ways to successfully initiate change and effectively influence others so that whatever initiative is that you would like to undertake, it will come to a successful fruition. Before we start though, I always find it interesting to get some feedback, and so we're going to have a poll in just a moment, but let me underscore again that a reactive change is really one in where you're closing a performance gap. And after I poll you here in a second, we have 2 scenarios that are going to underscore each of these types of change. We're going to compare 2 middle managers, PAULA and OWEN. One who is trying to initiate a reactive change. They're closing a performance gap. They want to launch a safety ambassador initiative at a plant. And one who is interested in proactive change, another middle manager, PAULA, who has been given the opportunity to select the next site her organization will build, and feels that this is a great opportunity for her to prove herself being junior among her colleagues. So both types of changes are ones that most middle managers undertake or want to undertake at some point, and all 5 strategies should address these particular changes. So before we begin, we have a large audience here today, and so what we want to find out is how many of you who are listening have successfully identified an opportunity or performance gap, and either 1, you were successful in initiating this change, and I'm going to ask you why, or 2, you attempted to initiate a change, but you were not successful. All right, for some reason, the influence tactics you tried to apply didn't work, or there were other reasonings, which again, I would like you to share. So Tyler, if you could launch this poll, that would be great.
Awesome. All right, we're going to launch it right now. And everyone can just select which option.
All right, option 1 and 2. As you're taking a look at these options, I would also like you to do me a favor, and Beth is going to help me out here. We're going to have you text in the chat box, you can offer a chat, on if you had selected option 1 and you were successful in initiating change, why do you think you were successful? If you really fell into the category of option 2, why do you think that you had made a great attempt, but you were not successful? So once the poll closes, I'm going to have Beth take a look at those and share a few with us.
Okay, and I'm going to close the poll. And I'm going to share the results. So it looks like 63% of our audience says that they were successful in initiating change, and 38%, or around that 37, 38, attempted but were not successful.
Excellent. So it is good to hear there were some success stories. And Beth, do we have anybody that's told you why they thought they were successful?
No, I guess people are typing slowly. Hopefully someone will share with us, but of course they can share while you're still continuing your presentation. But I think it's interesting that it's about 2/3 to 1/3 that have been successful, and with everything that's going on in the world and the business environment, I think that's pretty promising.
I actually think it is, because oftentimes we don't have at this level that type of success. So that's terrific. So while we're waiting to hear some other feedback, let me share with you our 2 stories that we're going to refer back to for the remainder of the presentation. So we have 2 different managers. We have Paula and Owen. They're both middle managers, as I stated earlier. Paula is really focused on a proactive change. She's looking at an opportunity. And Owen is looking at a reactive change. He's looking at a gap in performance that he would like to rectify. So Paula is a strategic mid-level director. She works for a large global organization, and she's been given this opportunity to determine the next location for expansion in one of 2 cities identified to be a strong fit for the company's business. She's determined to demonstrate that although she's the most junior among the other directors, she's the right person for this particular job. She feels completely ready to handle the challenge, to present her findings in 2 short weeks. This could be really a significant career-changing moment for her. She really takes this task to hand, and she conducts a thorough financial breakdown of the costs and benefits associated with each location. She prepares a detailed statistical analysis of the results to share with her boss and other strategic directors. She's confident she's done her homework. She's identified the best course of action for the next location for the organization. The presentation she holds within that 2-week period fails to convince her audience. At the meeting, 2 senior directors challenge her recommendations. They promote the other location and fail to consider any of the supporting data Paula has proposed. She leaves the meeting totally stunned and wonders where she went wrong in her approach. We're going to compare her situation with the second one, which is Owen. In Owen's situation, he works for a manufacturing plant that wants to promote a culture of safer work practices within the plant, so decides to launch a safety ambassador initiative. After several failed attempts, Owen, the young supervisor at the plant, volunteers to spearhead the program and ensure that this initiative is successfully launched this time around. Again, it's kind of a reactive change process. At first, he realizes it's easier to plan the launch than to actually launch a program that not everyone agrees is worthwhile. However, with a vision of what he needs to be accomplished in his mind, he identifies 4 critical decision makers who are essential to approving which operators will be selected to be safety ambassadors. He meets with many of the supervisors, takes the time to listen to feedback from the frustrated managers who've been asked to support the program. Afterwards, Owen secures commitment from these key supervisors whose agreement is paramount to the program's success. The result, the initiative experiences a very triumphant launch, and Owen is awarded much-deserved recognition. So when you compare and contrast both PAULA and OWEN, you may get a sense of why your particular initiative was successful. You're one of our 63%. Or you may realize that you made some of the same and very common errors that PAULA made and why you might be at that 38% mark. But what we'd like to do is be able to look at these and discuss what type of strategies they should have applied or did apply to successfully initiate change and, more importantly, to influence those that are around them. 5 strategies we're going to discuss include the following. One is you really need to understand what you're trying to change. When we look at change processes, sometimes we think we want something, but we haven't really identified and articulated what that actual change needs to be. So when you talk about launching a safer work practice within the plant and having a safety ambassador initiative, you want to say, what are you trying to change? Are you trying to change the behaviors of everyone in the organization? Do we have things that are more vital to the success of this program than others? Can we measure the success through maybe quality or fewer accidents, et cetera? When you look at prompting and wanting to initiate this change, the second thing you really need to consider is, do you have credibility? Most middle managers really believe that because they've been given a task by someone senior to them, such as PAULA, that in and of itself defines their credibility, that senior manager has seen them as able and committed to moving this initiative forward and has the confidence in their ability to do so, so they move forward in the belief that everyone else also believes they're credible. Most times we don't, or we aren't, I should say. Most times we don't have as much credibility as we thought we did because we haven't worked towards enhancing that with some of the key stakeholders involved. And so it's really important that we build this credibility, and we'll discuss how to do that. The third key strategy is you have to practice what Bowman and Deal love to articulate as the art of advocacy and inquiry. And that's basically stating your position and then listening to others' comments, concerns, feedback on what you're proposing. In both of these cases, we'll see where Owen did that very effectively, whereas PAULA moved forward, focused on her mission, and trying to get things done in a very short period of time. Fourth, we're going to talk about mapping the political terrain. Who are the stakeholders? And more importantly, who are the people that are probably easily convinced to be on board with this initiative? And who are those who are going to be your biggest resistors? How do you address the resistors effectively? And how will you get them to climb on board by using those that are already halfway in your court on this particular process? And then finally, the last strategy we're going to talk about is this idea of cultivating reciprocity using currencies of exchange. In other words, what are some of the techniques that we have to consider with each of the different allies we are trying to foster in order to support our particular initiatives? And what was important in this last particular point is recognizing that currencies of exchange are not mutually exclusive. We'll talk about the fact that you can use several at once, especially if the change initiative is complex, or in the case of PAULA, you have only a short period of time to actually get people on board to support what you're trying to present. So let's start with this very first one, determining what you're trying to change. When you are initiating any type of change, one of the things that is really important is that you understand what the change is and can you provide measurable results that the change is successful, and do you understand what behaviors are required in order to make the change succeed. So in the case of PAULA, she failed to identify any of the behaviors. She didn't really recognize that there may be directors who she needs to consider that are advocates for her and the location if she really approaches them in a way that listens to what they have to say. So we're going to couple this later on with this idea of advocacy and inquiry. She was really focused so much on the task that she didn't say it's not what happens, but who can make it happen. The vital behaviors become essential to any type of success. When you look at Owen realized a couple of things. First off, He knew he had to be able to state what the measurable goals would be. So he writes a memo to the plant manager and outlines the steps he thought were necessary to begin the process of implementing a safety program. And in that memo to the plant manager, he outlines clearly defined measurable goals. So he presents this. He also suggests hosting a plant-wide meeting to explain to the ambassadors, or to explain what the ambassador safety program is, clarify the purpose of the program, and generate greater awareness. One of the most important vital behaviors for the plant supervisors and the workers was to understand why they needed to be changing their behavior in the first place. What is the importance of this program? How is it relevant to them? And by hosting a plant-wide meeting, kind of a town hall, he was able to provide this information so they understood why they needed to reconsider some of the safety protocols that were initially launched at the plant, and why a change in that protocol was essential. So for OWEN, it was stepping back from the big picture first and saying, what am I trying to change? Can I provide clear, measurable results? What are the vital behaviors? And then begin to decide how to move forward and who you would have to influence, which is the step 3 in the process. When we talk about vital behaviors, I want to underscore a couple of things. In order to improve our existing situation, what must people do? We have a tendency to focus more on outcomes than on the behaviors necessary to achieve those outcomes. We might tell ourselves that, boy, if we want to be competitive, we really need to improve our customer service. And what can we do to improve customer service and make sure that we have 10% fewer complaint calls by the end of the month? The outcome's important. And you might say, well, we need our customer service representatives to spend more time. But really what you need to do is identify what behaviors on the phone with their customers they need to demonstrate in order to be successful in this endeavor. So part of this is understanding that it is really behavior that helps us achieve some of this change, not just the end. The other thing, too, is I always suggest that people look for positive deviance. And what that really means is, who are those people, for example, in OWEN situation, who are some of the plant workers or supervisors who are already really initiating safe practices? Who are the ones that seem to be very excited about the prospect of improving quality and reducing the number of accidents? Having those that are already engaged in the process makes it easier to solicit their help, to have them on board, and to say, okay, see, their behaviors result in what we want. It may be for the customer service rep finding the representative who has the best record with customers and trying to figure out what are they doing that might be different from everyone else that we would like to emulate and initiate among our other customer service reps. The last part in looking at vital behaviors and understanding some of that change, how you have to identify what it is learn from your mistakes. Everything we launch sometimes doesn't work. And in the case of the Safety Ambassador Initiative, it had already failed twice. And one of the things OWEN did before he even decided to move forward and volunteer to try to launch it for a third time was understand why it failed and what we need to do differently. And part of that was involving everybody in the process. But many times that we have to try something, you may try it on a smaller scale to underscore why you were successful, or you may want to do it in one part of an organization, or you need to step back and just examine, let's look again why we weren't as successful as we thought we would be. So identifying behaviors, a few of these vital behaviors can really result in big change and should happen before you even start the influence process. You can be a great influencer if you have some of these dynamics already in hand, those clear measurable results, the goals that you want, the behaviors you need, and some examples of positive deviance to support the claims you're about to make.
Lori, before you go on, a couple people have written in, and what they're saying is it's not the behaviors of the people that they're trying to influence, meaning, let's say, the customer service people, but it's more that the senior executives are the ones resistant to the change. So
absolutely. I would say I would absolutely agree with that, that it isn't necessarily, I mean, part of understanding it is I'm going to go back to that comment on positive deviance. If it is really the reluctance of senior management or people above you to grab hold that this is really the right thing to do, then you want to find the one that actually is doing something that is what we call positively deviant, that you have that senior manager that has actually practiced some of the things that you think you're trying to initiate in your change, and you can use them to advocate for you as well. You can look at examples within your organization or competing organizations of positive deviance and look for other things to sell the senior managers that this is a really great thing that we want to use. More importantly, though, what you're trying to do is at this point is just set the stage. I think you'll find the next 4 different influence tactics to be able to persuade those who are reluctant to embark on this change initiative with you, more likely to be supporters in the end. So I'm going to try and go through a few of these, and I think we'll address some of the questions about what we do with our senior managers who are not on board with us yet. So the first thing we want to talk about is this idea of building credibility. And building credibility is so essential because what often happens, as we saw with PAULA, is you are given a task and you're excited about it and you focus on it and you want to prove, but you really start thinking that you can initiate change without having really worked on your own credibility factor. So there's different things that you can do that would be essential to success in this endeavor. One of them in building credibility is we look at Owen, right? What Owen did, which really worked for him, again, this was the 3rd time, is he began to conduct what we call private interviews. He held one-on-one conversations that would help him better understand the interests of those impacted. He could address their concerns that way to help develop trust and to promote some collaboration. When he interviewed other supervisors and operating managers to share his enthusiasm with the program, he actively listened to any of their concerns that they had, why they felt it didn't work in the past, why it was too demanding on their time, and what other factors he should consider as he launches this initiative. Lastly, he also asked for public support from the plant manager to enhance his credibility. And it's really important to ask for public support from someone who has who supports the initiative, but already has established credibility. It may not be someone as high up as the plant manager is in Owen's case, but it could be someone the next level or 2 levels above you who really is in your corner on this initiative and sees the importance to what you're trying to achieve, to the mission of the organization, to a change in dynamics or behaviors in your department or division. Finally, you actually also then want to build a coalition that includes individuals who have the authority and responsibility for ensuring change can be successfully cultivated. So as you start to, and it gets to be really critical, you have that one person who is your public support. And then you say, okay, who does that one person know? Who are they influential with that I should go and talk to next? How can I start building this coalition and having these one-on-one conversations? We often are told to go and start with the resistor, figure out who the biggest resistor is, and go find out for them why they're resisting it so we can address all of their concerns. And in reality, you are much more effective if you build credibility with one-on-one conversations first with those who will support you, and that you begin to build the public support for your initiative before you go and address the person who is your naysayer. Those who kind of jump right in and think that they have the plant manager support so they can move forward will find the results greatly compromised. And so we're really looking at understanding needing that credibility, but it really happens on doing it on a one-on-one conversation, looking for the person that is in that level above you that has established credibility, people believe when he or she speaks, and also though can authorize and support the change initiative. In other words, they can provide resources or they can endorse what it is that you're trying to initiate. They have that authority and responsibility, which is really important. And this could be someone on the senior team. So if you have a resistor on the senior team, you really need to find who your ally is on the senior team as well, and someone that you can start with, glean their public support, and move forward. The second thing that you want to do, which is really important, is you want to practice what they call the art of advocacy and inquiry. Bowman and Deal talk about this in their book, Reframing Organizations, and it's such an essential skill. In the situation with PAULA, what we really saw with PAULA is that she was very strong in advocating. She had done her homework, she had the statistics, she was convinced this was the right course of action, and I'm going to tell you why. Well, the problem with that is when you start telling someone what to do or telling them why they should think something, people immediately begin to resist you. The other thing is you may have not considered other important elements of the decision that are impacting some of these stakeholders. So it would be much more important for you, in order to sway your colleagues, to understand what else they're considering. What do they find are important? What questions, concerns, or interests do they have in the decision that you're making? If you don't, then your behavior can be perceived very negatively by those around you and again damage your credibility. What you want to do is bolster the credibility by balancing this idea of advocacy and inquiry, which is what Owen did. Owen firmly believed that there were certain operating supervisors that would be better ambassadors of safety as compared to their peers. And so he suggested as much as some of the key decision makers he identified. However, when he was moving forward and having this discussion, he then decided he needed to solicit feedback from them, ask them if they had questions or concerns regarding his choice as compared to his selections. Through the act of both advocacy and inquiry, Owen was better able to convince senior managers to listen to his suggestions while simultaneously understanding their positions and addressing most of their concerns. Then he went back to that building credibility piece to it, and he had private interviews with each of the key decision makers to advocate his list of operators that would be more effective in the role of safety ambassador. By enhancing his credibility and promoting advocacy and inquiry, soliciting diverse points of view, he was able to begin a training program with a group of ambassadors that would be the most influential at promoting safety standards around the plant. So instead of coming to each of these people and saying, here's my list, I would like them to join the program, he came and said, here's who I'm considering. Is there any reason you don't think they'll be effective? Is there any reason we shouldn't ask them to do this? And let me explain more. You'll see that advocacy is often using some kind of very directive language. You use data, you use expertise. Inquiry, on the other hand, uses less directive language. You ask questions, you do some critical thinking, you open up possibilities. Balancing these two can secure commitment from those who may be initially reluctant, and again, most importantly, also help you build that credibility. You start to develop that trust in the relationship and some authenticity that you sincerely want this to be a collaborative effort, not just something that you're going to do on your own. Paula failed to recognize this, relying mostly on that advocating of data and looking at the pros and cons, and we really needed her to move forward and to consider, okay, why wouldn't these other directors like this particular location? What haven't I considered? And to actually sit down one-on-one and ask them. If she had considered that, she would have been much more effective in securing the location that she had chosen in the first place. The third, actually what I want to talk about for a minute before we move on is when we look at advocacy and inquiry, one of the things that this grid underscores, and it's really important, and you can see this in, again, the cases that I've been sharing. If you look in the left-hand corner, you'll see that someone who has is high in advocating but low in inquiring comes off very assertive. And most of us do not find an assertive behavior very collaborative, and it almost makes us want to react negatively to it. So even if you agreed with them, they're coming in and telling you something, put you in a position of trying to find fault or say, well, no, that's not what I want. If you are both high on inquiry and high on advocacy, then you're viewed as much more integrative. You're there as a collaborator. You're really seen as someone who says, okay, let's talk about this. I want you engaged in this discussion. I think I have some information, but what am I missing? And the more that you solicit input from others, as we know in decision-making literature, the more likely it is that they're going to confirm the decision that you make. So the more input and collaboration in that process, the more effective the outcome. So you really want to consider both advocating, which is really important, and most middle managers want to look important, but you also want to be able to say, okay, defer, what haven't I considered, what may your concerns be that I should address, what other information should I research in order to answer any of your concerns. So that practice of both advocacy and inquiry. The third, and probably I think one of the most important for middle managers, is this idea of mapping the political terrain and to really capitalize on those formal and informal networks of influence. What you want to do is, who are the stakeholders most impacted by these changes? One of the biggest things PAULA failed to do is really look at the other directors who would also be moving and possibly working in these new locations. She didn't consider whether or not it was of interest to them, if they were concerned whether or not their clients would want to be working in that particular location, if it was more work for them or less work, would it provide greater access or not. She basically kind of decided that she was going to give them data and that would be sufficient. What you really want to do is identify not only, again, who are going to support you, but who your resistors are. And how can you then find a route that moves around these obstacles of those that are resisting the change. You want to recognize who your opinion leaders are and who supports that change and can determine what you want them to do to assist you. Opinion leaders can be someone immediately above you. It can be someone who's at the peer level with you, but seems to have the ear of senior managers, maybe more than you do. It could be someone who is instrumental to making the change happen. It could be, as in Owen's case, the plant manager. So opinion leaders are really necessary because, again, they create that cadre of allies that will help you address some of the concerns of those that are currently resisting you with everything they have in trying to move this forward. The other thing you want to do is collect information on the formal and informal relationships between your change targets, receptive to change, and those resistant to change. I always encourage when I work with clients or MBA students that you do what we call this network map. And in this network map, what you're doing is you're identifying what each person's connections are. So who are the friends of the person and colleagues right above you? Of those people, who are the ones who would be supporting your change initiative, and who might be those who are resistant? So who would you need to secure that conversation with first so you create the coalition of allies, and they collectively can help you address the ones who are resisting the change? Mapping this network is so essential to success because, again, you don't want to go to the first resistor or the biggest resistor who has a lot of clout behind them. You build up your coalition by looking at the relationships. And if you need 3 or 4 people who are supporting your change, then those 3 or 4 people collectively can give you the clout you need to go to the resistor and say, well, you know, here's what we collectively think, not just what I think. And the more kind of coalition you have behind your initiative, the more likely it is for success. So do the map, look at those relationships, think about who has lunch with who meets with whom on a regular basis, who've been friends in the organization for a long time, and of those kind of groups and targets, who's very receptive to your change and who's very resistant to that change. The very last thing I want to discuss, which to me I think is one of the most important. We've been talking a lot about building credibility, understanding vital behaviors, looking at practicing this idea of advocacy and inquiry, and also really understanding kind of who's in the political terrain, you know, mapping it out, understanding the relationships between those receptive to change and those that are resisting change. The last one is kind of the how are you going to do this? And I think for me this is the most interesting because it's the one that it's easiest to practice, but also the most challenging because you really have to know the people around you who are involved in this change process and who you're trying to influence. So it's this idea of reciprocity fostered by Cohen and Bradford in their Pinnacle article on influence without authority. And one of the things that they talk about is this idea of give and take. Anything that we do needs to have that kind of relationship where we offer give and take in a variety of different ways. And the more that we understand these currencies of exchange, what we can do for others, what they can do for us, the better we can build trust then among those that are really essential for us to move this initiative forward and to influence others in the process as well. So when you look at cultivating reciprocity, what you want to do is you really want to identify 1 or more persons that you would like to influence. All right, someone who can really help you initiate change. And we call this person the potential ally. And identifying that could be someone, again, like the plant manager for OWEN. It could have been, for example, OWEN also realized that they would need the help of maintenance in order to launch the ambassador program. And so he solicited the maintenance supervisor and said, who do you think would be good for my program? And why do you think they would be good? And the maintenance supervisor actually said, you know what, I'd like to do it myself. So part of it was identifying this potential ally. Then what you want to do is think of them as a partner. All right, that we often develop strategic alliances with people outside our organization, suppliers, distributors, customers, etc. But we need to consider the allies inside our organization. What are some of those allies that can help us move this strategy forward? And how can I define, as the influencer, areas of mutual benefit? So we have our potential ally, and we really think about, what is it that is equally beneficial to them as it is to me. All of us have our own interests, but we're looking for something mutual to move forward. Number 3 is essential. And I think it's, again, this whole idea of it, to make something very successful, to initiate and influence change, you have to do your homework. And it really is understanding the world of the potential ally. What are their pressures? What problems are they facing? What do they need? What are their goals? Sometimes resistors to change are resisting us not because they don't support what we're trying to do, but because it actually may conflict with one of their goals. So you may want the ambassador program to take 2 people to be safety ambassadors, and yet if you remove those people and have them be safety ambassadors, they're not contributing in some way to the overarching goal of that particular area of the plant. So part of it is recognizing what are the pressures that ally is under, in what way does your change initiative compromise what they're trying to accomplish, seem to be the antithesis of their goals and what they're trying to accomplish, and then frame your influence strategies in ways that take into account some of these pressures or problems, the other person's needs or goals. I think we go upstairs and we start having the conversation right away without understanding what our boss is under pressure, what else is the boss having to address? Why won't they take time to talk to us? And I think that if we did a step back and do some of that homework, then we will be in a better position to, again, be able to identify the mutual benefits that the change or the initiative has for everyone engaged and involved. The 4th thing you want to do in this cultivating reciprocity is you really want to identify key goals and available resources that are valued by your potential ally. What do they need, and how can you assist them in doing this? So are there goals that they think are essential, such as the maintenance supervisor who really wanted someone from his area to be part of this particular program? What resources are necessary to make this happen? In Owen's case, the resources that he needed were to have people areas of the plant who would offer up someone to be an ambassador and help them successfully launch and maintain this particular program. PAULA had a tendency not to see the value in having other directors be her allies, and she didn't understand why their input into the selection of the location was so important to the outcome and success of the initiative. Can you create then an exchange transition that's focused on this mutual gain so that win-win outcomes can be achieved? What factors can interfere with successful exchange, all right? And there are a number of factors that can impede that. Some of it is just the way you ask, the tone you use, how you frame something, the situation and timing. Timing is so critical when you go and talk to someone about how you're going to address the change and what you need from them. You really want to think about, is this when they are at the height of the busiest day of the week? Should it be on a Friday afternoon or a Tuesday morning over a cup of coffee when things aren't as crazy? Do you need to do it right before the end of a quarter? Should you wait until after the end? Any of these pressing concerns. So timing is really important to creating that win-win. The last thing that is essential is to understand what types of currencies are available to you. And so I want to briefly go over that and then step back and answer any questions that you might have, as I know I'm throwing a lot of information out at once. 3 different sets of currencies. We have the first that we call inspiration-related or task-related. So these are things that are, can you really use a strategy that recognizes someone's need to understand how this change initiative affects the vision of the organization and where they want to bring themselves, how it will enhance that position? Do you really frame your initiative in terms of how it will improve overall excellence of the organization, differentiate you from your competitors, for example? Is that what is important to your potential ally? Is it that it's the right thing to do? There's an idea of moral correctness that is important to the potential ally. Do you frame and use that currency in order to make and influence change? We also have a lot of task-related ones, such as information and cooperation, assistance, or resources. Which of these would be most beneficial to your potential ally? Do you know? Is it a combination, right? Is it information and assistance? When we look at Owen, one of the things he did well is he recognized that the plant supervisors in the different areas of the plant were really overwhelmed by all the need of data. And they wanted to know, here's just another program that you're about to launch that's going to require us to take a look at all this data. So one of the things that Owen said is, no, I will meet with you once a week and I will share with you any of the metrics that we've gleaned from the safety program. So what he provided to them that they wanted was both information and assistance. And in that sense, that was an influence or an exchange that he used a currency to move forward on the initiative and to secure their support, to make them more receptive to this change process. A second set of currencies that we take a look at are this idea of whether it's position related or reputation related. For position related, sometimes what you want is a potential ally is very interested in something that will provide to them recognition, visibility, enhance their reputation, be able to provide them access to networks or particular contacts, or have a sense of being an insider in what's happening. Other ones are more reputation related. So the potential ally may just want this idea that you're including them in this decision. Part of the situation with PAULA is that she never included any of the other directors. She didn't look for their acceptance in what she was doing and didn't recognize their seniority and expertise. And so in part, she created more resistors than she did allies. The last area of exchanges that we talk about are those that are personal. Some people do things simply because they personally feel like it's the right thing to do. They personally want to help you out. They like the idea of being involved in something new and exciting. They feel a sense of gratitude from you for what's happening, and that's all they need. So recognizing those currencies are obviously essential because some of those are the easiest to secure right away, other than some of the other resources. So you have many different types of currencies of exchange available. There are a couple of things about these that you want to realize. Choosing that effective currency or exchange is vital. You really have to know kind of what your ally values, what's important to them, and they're all going to be different. Currencies of exchange are not mutually exclusive. In other words, the more significant the initiative or the change strategy, the more challenging the situation for the influencer, the more likely you're going to have to pay several currencies across each of the categories. You may have to do some information, provide some resources, promote some type of gratitude and recognition. It can be using many different areas at once in order to really secure this particular ally that you're seeking. You don't need to be at the top of the organization or have a lot of formal power to command multiple resources that other people may value. Owen, in the case of the plant, was just someone who had terrific relationships with many other people in the plant. People respected him. He asked questions. He was engaged with others. He had a very amenable personality, and all of these things made people willing to do things for him more than others. And so in that sense, he had a resource of others at the plant to provide to those who were above him looking for that same type of support. So part of it is recognizing what do you bring to the table, how do you add value, what resources do you command, and how you can use those as currencies of exchange with each of these different potential allies. So bottom line, we're really looking at the greater the extent to which the influencer, you, the middle manager, has worked with potential allies and created trust. You've done this again by building a lot of credibility, those one-on-one conversations, seeking information, telling stories. You've practiced both advocacy as well as inquiry. You've used data and statistics and knowledge, but asked about concerns, asked for information, answered any questions. You've identified the needs of your key stakeholders, those that are your allies first, the ones that are going to support the change initiative, and then those that are resisting the change initiative. You've looked at the vital behaviors required for the initiative to succeed. And at last, you've cultivated some type of reciprocity. You use different currencies of exchange. You understand the goals of your ally, the pressures that they're under, and you can use that then to help them climb on board with the initiative to, in turn, generate reciprocity, to offer something which could be at a later date, a support of something they're trying to do, something else that they might need. It's always a constant give and take when you consider reciprocity. And collectively, these different strategies, all 5 of these strategies, should enable you to foster greater success in what you're trying to accomplish in your initiative, whether it be something that is a performance gap, and so you're doing a reactive type of change initiative, or you see an opportunity that you would like to capitalize upon, and it is a proactive change initiative, and you need to figure out, again, who that map of stakeholders is and how you can launch your initiative. Questions? Comments?
So, Lori, this was a great presentation. We've had some other people chime in. I wanted to wait till you were done. One person did kind of say what you were talking about, engage the entire operating division's employees in providing solutions. So it wasn't that they, instead of them driving it, was more they facilitated and empowered them. And she felt that they were successful because they explained to the group why they needed the change, what the change would result in, and then told them how to change, to have the right information, and then help from the upper management. The thing with that, though, is that takes time. And I think one of the things that sometimes middle managers get caught up in is that either they're new to the organization or new to a department or division or location, and time is actually kind of working against them. So I don't know if you could speak to that, but I mean, it's one thing to secure support, but then also you need continued support, moving forward as well.
I mean, that's a great question, and it's also a great comment. Time is really critical, so sometimes you're like Paula, and she had 2 weeks to make these things happen. Sometimes you have more time, like Owen did, because it was their 3rd attempt, and so they could step back and take a look at the situation. Most organizations can tell you, and I always tell people when they're new to an organization, especially if you come in new at the middle manager level, is you really need to sit down and have these one-on-one conversations with people around you, whether they're peers, people you're working with who are at your level. Sit down with your subordinates and have one-on-one conversations, and we do what we call kind of an appreciative inquiry. What do you think is working well? What do we need to do differently? And what happens in these one-on-one conversations is you start to identify who some of those opinion leaders are we talked about earlier. And it's important to recognize who is it that people keep commenting on as either maybe a big resistor or as someone who is really looking to foster change. It's to your benefit to really learn the landscape that you're operating in, and to know who are these people that are connected when you're trying to make change happen. I think it's very hard as someone brand new to an organization to come in and then think you're going to initiate something successfully within a short period of time without having done your homework and mapped your stakeholders and build some credibility and ask these questions, really saying, I'm thinking this is what we need to do to change. Tell me why you think this wouldn't work. Have we done this in the past? And learning, I mean, part of the thing that happens with middle managers, which is so important, is they have a tendency to get so caught up in doing the job that they've been hired to do. So they sit in their offices and they're sitting at their computers and they're working on their spreadsheets, and they're not actually going out and doing the face-to-face networking, communicating, etc. And you can, one, never communicate too much, and two, it's really important if you're going to make anything happen to really understand how this particular company operates. What's their culture for change? Are they, very open to experiencing and trying new things? Are they very reluctant? Are they, one of those that hold their resources close to vest and don't want to hear about the latest and greatest? And so that will let you know immediately, do you have a lot of resistors or do you have that one ally? I'll go back to the other comment I made. You really want to find the person who has both established credibility already that can be your advocate, and you want to find that person that has the authority to help you initiate that change successfully so that they can provide some of the resources. And that's very challenging when you're brand new in the organization, but it is critical to success. One ally is all you need to start building up that coalition that becomes essential. Does that answer your question? I hope.
So, Lori, here's another question. If Paula were to have a second chance, does she simply employ these strategies, or does she need to formally address her shortcomings on the first attempt to her audience?
I don't think I would advocate to say, okay, here's how I goofed. I do think she has to step back, and I would do that in one-on-one conversations. And I would sit down and say, you know, one of the things I realized as a junior director is I was remiss in understanding what your concerns and interests might have been. I was so excited about some of the research I was finding out on this location that I didn't step back and consider why you wouldn't agree with the numbers and other questions I should be asking when we were determining which location. I would do that one-on-one more, and I would frame it in a way that doesn't say, I made a mistake necessarily. It's just I didn't sufficiently address everything necessary for choosing this location. I mean, Paula did do all the things she needed to do. She did a lot of analysis and research. She just was trying to prove herself, which is often what we do as a middle manager, is wanting to demonstrate, I can do this. I don't need any, you know, I'm the right person and I've got the skills and competencies. But it would go a long way if we also then collaborated and had that credibility that underscored why the boss chose you for this particular situation. Not having those one-on-one conversations and almost dismissing those above you or senior to you is not a way to glean support, and people look for you almost to fail. You know, if they feel that you have marginalized them in this process and you didn't consider their input, then they really are sitting back with their arms crossed. So I would follow up this meeting with one-on-ones and saying, all right, you know, obviously this is why I'm junior and you're senior, but here's what I think, you know, here's why I thought this was such a great location. What should I have asked you? What else should I be thinking about? I really, you know, I need to know this obviously to move forward.
So the other thing is I mean, needless to say, you have all these upfront conversations. Now you're into the change. And, you know, again, there's always twists and turns. You know, you might have the greatest plan set out, but something happens, right? You know, I think one of the things to consider, what you've talked about a little bit, but maybe you can elaborate on, is how do you keep communicating consistently throughout the organization? I mean, it's one thing to report to senior management, but a lot of times the more junior people, you know, all of a sudden rumors get started, or you know, oh, it's going to affect me this way when it really isn't. So how do you keep a consistent message across the whole enterprise?
Well, one of the things I think that works really well is this idea of having opportune moments for what we call kind of a town meeting. Can you bring a group of people together, whether it's a department meeting, whether it's a divisional meeting, so that you can address those rumors? I think that one of the things that we do very well here at Bryant that President Coakley has initiated is he does town hall meetings constantly when he feels the rumors are and that support is waning. He wants to tell people himself why we're doing what we're doing and why it's important. And I think that when you're initiating change, you need those who are your allies in the process to join you in a conversation with everyone else on why we're doing this and why it's important. And again, to provide that opportunity on a larger basis for both advocating why we're doing it and why it's important, and then inquiring why at this point they still can't support what you're trying to do. What is it that you still haven't considered? What do you need to address? How do you include them in the conversation all along the way? Sometimes what happens as middle managers is we're so excited that we secured support initially and it looks like it's a green light go, that then we end up being more like Paula and going off on our own and doing what we need to do, and we don't realize we need to continually check in and share our progress with others and collaborate still and include those, especially those that are on the fence on whether or not they're still waiting to see. I'll support you right now, but let's see if this is really going to give us the return on our investment that you're stating it will. So it's definitely checking in and not just being so excited that you've got the go-ahead, that you're not including others continuously in the conversation. And that keeps that message the same throughout. It's that consistency that's so important, and constant communication and working with those opinion leaders and mapping all of those stakeholders and redoing your map. I mean, one of the things that we haven't really talked about, but your map changes. And so suddenly people who are resistors and you've kind of brought them on board, Then you've got to look at, okay, who do they know and how can they help me and what can I do for them? So your map also suddenly might change, and every now and then as you move towards this initiation of a process or a strategy, take a look at your map and see, are adjustments necessary?
One last question is, where does the influence of the worker bees come in?
I think definitely that is part of those one-on-one conversations, because a credibility has to be from both ends. You know, credibility is great that senior managers think you're credible, but the people who are going to be your followers also have to believe in your abilities. And so part of it is also having conversations with those that are the worker bees. And I know Owen did this in the plant. Not only did he talk to plant supervisors and did he talk to the plant manager, but he also talked to those who would be day-to-day responsible for initiating some of these changes and saying, what are you concerned about? And, you know, what part of the safety program do you think we haven't addressed, or it doesn't address what you've experienced on the job? And so part of it is, again, they are still those that you are telling them why you're doing something, you know, but then inquiring what is it that you've missed from their level. I mean, the workers are so critical to any success because they're so close to the situation. They really understand some of the things that those of us further up don't see on a daily basis. People who work with customers will have a much better understanding of what customers' concerns and issues are, and so should be able to relay that back to anybody making a change in customer service. So I think you definitely have to include them in the process, and you'd be remiss if you thought you were only really influencing those above you. You definitely have to influence the followers as well, so they'll continue to follow you.
Great. Well, I think that that was it for the questions that we got, and we're coming close to the end. This has been extremely helpful. I've certainly learned a lot today.
Well, thank you. It's been very fun, and I do think it's a topic that affects most people in every organization, because most of us fall in that mid-level range, and we need to know what ways can make us influential. So hopefully you'll apply the 5 strategies, and we can turn the 38% into 100%.
All right. With that being said, thank you, Lori. I'd like to just close us out today. So on behalf of the Bryant Alumni Association, I'd like to thank Lori and Beth for a fantastic presentation and discussion. Most of all, I'd like to thank all of you for joining us today. Please look for our short survey in your email. I do want to say that we did record this presentation, so both the recording and the slide deck will be available for your review, and then if you want to share with any of your colleagues, especially this presentation. I also want to mention that our next webinar is scheduled for Thursday, November 2nd, and our presenter will be Eswani Ameichi, a class of 2004 grad, and her topic will be on business success starts with planning. So more information about her webinar and the link to register will be on our website this week. Also, the archive of this webinar will be on our website, and that is alumniconnect.bryant.edu. And yeah, that concludes today's webinar. Thank you all so much. Have a wonderful afternoon.